Hello, Cardinals, and welcome to today's installment of Cormac McCarthy's The Road. They found some utensils and a few pieces of clothing, a sweatshirt, some plastic they could use for a tarp. He was sure they were being watched, but he saw no one. In a pantry, they came upon part of a sack of cornmeal that rats had been at a long time ago. He sifted the meal through a section of window screen and collected a small handful of dried turds, and they built a fire on the concrete porch of the house and made cakes of the meal and cooked them over a piece of tin. Then they ate them slowly one by one. He wrapped the few remaining in a paper and put them in a knapsack. The boy was sitting on the steps when he saw something move at the rear of the house across the road. A face was looking at him. A boy, about his age, wrapped in an oversized wool coat with sleeves turned back. He stood up. He ran across the road and up the drive. No one there. He looked toward the house, and then he ran to the bottom of the yard through the dead weeds to a still black creek. "Come back," he called. "I won't hurt you." He was standing there crying when his father came sprinting across the road and seized him by the arm. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "What are you doing?" "There's a little boy, Papa. There's a little boy." "There's no little boy. What are you doing?" "Yes, there is. I saw him." "I told you to stay put, didn't I? Now we've got to go. Come on." "I just wanted to see him, Papa. I just wanted to see him." The man took him by the arm and they went back through the yard. The boy would not stop crying and he would not stop looking back. "Come on," the man said. "We've got to go." "I want to see him, Papa." "There's no one to see. Do you want to die? Is that what you want?" "I don't care," said the boy, sobbing. "I don't care." The man stopped. He stopped and squatted and held him. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't say that. You mustn't say that." They made their way back through the wet streets to the viaduct and collected the coats and the blanket from the car and went on to the railway embankment where they climbed up and crossed the tracks into the woods and got the cart and headed out to the highway. "What if that little boy doesn't have anybody to take care of him?" he said. "What if he doesn't have a papa?" "There are people there. They were just hiding." He pushed the cart out into the road and stood there. He could see the tracks of the truck through the wet ash, faint and washed out, but there. He thought that he could smell them. The boy was pulling at his coat. "Papa," he said. "What?" "I'm afraid for that little boy." "I know, but he'll be all right." "We should go get him, Papa. We could get him and take him with us. We could take him and we could take the dog. The dog could catch something to eat." "We can't." "And I'd give that little boy half of my food." "Stop it. We can't." He was crying again. "What about the little boy?" he sobbed. "What about the little boy?" At a crossroads they sat in the dusk, and he spread out the pieces of the map and the road and studied them. He put his finger down. "This is us," he said, "right there." The boy wouldn't look. He sat studying the twisted matrix of roots in red and black with his finger at the junction where he thought they might be, as if he'd see their small selves crouching there. "We could go back," the boy said softly. "It's not too far. It's not too late." They made a dry camp in a wood lot not far from the road. They could find no sheltered place to make a fire that would not be seen, so they made none. They ate each of them the two cornmeal cakes, and they slept together, huddled on the ground in the coats and blankets. He held the child, and after a while the child stopped shivering, and after a while he slept. The dog that he remembers followed us for 2 days. I tried to coax it to come, but it would not. I made a noose of wire to catch it. There were 3 cartridges in the pistol, none to spare. She walked away down the road. The boy looked after her, and then he looked at me, and then he looked at the dog, and he began to cry and beg for the dog's life, and I promised I would not hurt the dog. A trellis of a dog with hide stretched over it. The next day it was gone. That's the dog he remembers. He doesn't remember any little boys. He'd put a handful of dried raisins in a cloth in his pocket, and at noon they sat in the dead grass by the side of the road and ate them. The boy looked at him. "That's all there is, isn't it?" he said. "Yes." "Are we going to die now?" "No." "What are we going to do?" "We're going to drink some water, and then we're going to keep going down the road." "Okay." In the evening, they tramped out across the field, trying to find a place where their fire would not be seen, dragging the cart behind them over the ground. So little of promise in that country. Tomorrow they'd find something to eat. Night overtook them on a muddy road. They crossed into a field and plodded on toward a distant stand of trees, skylighted stark and black against the last of the visible world. By the time they got there, it was dark of night. He held the boy's hand and kicked up limbs and brush and got a fire going. The wood was damp, but he shaved the dead bark off with his knife, and he stacked brush and sticks all about to dry in the heat. Then he spread a sheet of plastic on the ground and got the coats and blankets from the cart, and he took off their damp and muddy shoes, and they sat there in silence with their hands out held to the flames. He tried to think of something to say, but he could not. He'd had this feeling before, beyond the numbness and the dull despair, the world shrinking down about a raw core of parsable entities, the names of things slowly following those things into oblivion, colors, the names of birds, things to eat, finally the names of things one believed to be true. More fragile than he would have thought. How much was already gone? The sacred idiom shorn of its reference and so of its reality, drawing down like something trying to preserve heat and time to wink out forever. They slept through the night in their exhaustion, and in the morning the fire was dead and black on the ground. He pulled on his muddy shoes and went to gather wood, blowing on his cupped hands. So cold, it could be November, it could be later. He got a fire going and walked out to the edge of the woodlot and stood looking over the countryside, the dead fields, a barn in the distance. They hiked out along the dirt road and along a hill where a house had once stood. It had burned long ago. The rusted shape of a furnace standing in the black water of the cellar. Sheets of charred metal roofing crumpled in the fields where the wind had blown it. In the barn, they scavenged a few handfuls of some grain he did not recognize out of the dusty floor of a metal hopper and stood eating it, dust and all. Then they set out across the fields towards the road. They followed a stone wall past the remains of an orchard. The trees in the ordered rows gnarled and black, and the fallen limbs thick on the ground. He stopped and looked across the fields. Wind in the east, the soft ash moving in the furrows. Stopping, moving again. He'd seen it all before. Shapes of dried blood in the stubble grass and gray coils of viscera where the slain had been field dressed and hauled away. The wall beyond held a frieze of human heads, all faced alike, dried and caved with their taut grins and shrunken eyes. They wore gold rings and leather ears, and in the wind their sparse and ratty hair twisted on their skulls. The teeth in their sockets like dental molds, the crude tattoos etched in some home-brewed woad faded in the beggared sunlight. Spiders, swords, targets, a dragon, runic slogans, creeds misspelled, old scars with old motifs stitched along the borders. The heads not truncheon shapeless had been flayed of their skins, and the raw skulls painted and signed across the forehead in a scrawl, and one white bone skull had the plate sutures etched carefully in ink like a blueprint for a simile. He looked back at the boy, standing by the cart in the wind. He looked at the dry grass where it moved and at the dark and twisted trees in their rows, a few sheds of clothing blown against the wall, everything gray in the ash. He walked along the wall, passing the masks in a last review, and through a stile and out to where the boy was waiting. He put his arm around his shoulder. Okay, he said, let's go. He'd come to see a message in such late history, a message and a warning, and so this tableau of the slain and the devoured did prove to be. He woke in the morning and turned over the blanket and looked back down the road through the trees the way they'd come in time to see the marchers appear four abreast, dressed in clothing of every description, all wearing red scarves at their necks, red or orange, as close to red as they could find. He put his hand on the boy's head. Shh, he said. What is it, Papa? People on the road, keep your face down, don't look. No smoke from the dead fire, nothing to be seen of the cart. He wallowed into the ground and lay watching across his forearm. An army of tennis shoes tramping, carrying 3-foot lengths of pipe with leather wrappings, lanyards at the wrist. Some of the pipes were threaded through with lengths of chain fitted at their ends with every manner of bludgeon. They clanked past, marching with a swaying gait like wind-up toys, bearded, their breath smoking through their masks. Shh, he said, shh. The phalanx following carried spears or lances tasseled with ribbons, the long blades hammered out of the truck springs in some crude, forged-up country. The boy lay with his face in his arms, terrified. They passed 200 feet away, the ground shuddering lightly, tramping. Behind them came wagons drawn by slaves in harness and piled with goods of war. And after that, the women, perhaps a dozen in number, some of them pregnant. And lastly, a supplementary consort of catamites ill-clothed against the cold and fitted in dog collars and yoked each to each. All passed on. They lay listening. Are they gone, Papa? Yes, they're gone. Did you see them? Yes. Were they the bad guys? Yes, they were the bad guys. There's lots of them, those bad guys. Yes, there are, but they're gone. They stood and brushed themselves off, listening to the silence in the distance. Where are they going, Papa? I don't know. They're on the move. It's not a good sign. Why isn't it a good sign? It just isn't. We need to get the map and take a look. They pulled the cart from the brush with which they'd covered it, and he raised it up and piled the blankets and the coats in, and they pushed out onto the road and stood looking where the last of the ragged horde seemed to hang like an afterimage in the disturbed air. In the afternoon, it started to snow again. They stood watching the pale gray flakes sip down out of the sullen murk. They trudged on, a frail slush forming over the dark surface of the road. The boy kept falling behind, and he stopped and waited for him. Stay with me, he said. You walk too fast. I'll go slower. They went on. You're not talking again. I'm talking. You want to stop? I always want to stop. We have to be more careful. I have to be more careful. I know. We'll stop, okay? Okay. We just have to find a place. Okay. The falling snow curtained them. There was no way to see anything at either side of the road. He was coughing again, and the boy was shivering, the two of them side by side under the sheet of plastic, pushing the grocery cart through the snow. Finally, he stopped. The boy was shaking uncontrollably. We have to stop, he said. It's really cold. I know. Where are we? Where are we? Yes. I don't know. If we're going to die, would you tell me? I don't know. We're not going to die. They left the cart overturned in a field of sedge, and he took the coats and the blankets wrapped in the plastic tarp, and they set out. Hold on to my coat, he said. Don't let go. They crossed through a sedge to a fence and climbed through, holding down the wire for each other with their hands. The wire was cold, and it creaked in the staples. It was darkening fast. They went on. What they came to was a cedar wood, the trees dead and black, but still full enough to hold the snow. Beneath each one was a precious circle of dark earth and cedar duff. They settled under a tree and piled the blankets and coats on the ground, and he wrapped the boy in one of the blankets and set to raking up the dead needles in a pile. He kicked a cleared place in the snow out where the fire wouldn't set the tree alight, and he carried wood from the other trees, breaking off the limbs and shaking away the snow. When he struck the lighter of the rich tinder, the fire crackled instantly, and he knew that it would not last long. He looked at the boy. I've got to go for more wood, he said. I'll be in the neighborhood, okay? Where's the neighborhood? It just means I won't be far. Okay. The snow by now was half a foot on the ground. He floundered out through the trees, pulling up fallen branches where they stuck out of the snow, and by the time he had an armload and made his way back to the fire, it had burned down to a nest of quaking embers. He threw the branches on the fire and set out again. Hard to stay ahead. The woods were getting dark, and the firelight did not reach far. If he hurried, he only grew faint. When he looked behind him, the boy was trudging through snow halfway to his knees, gathering limbs and piling them in his arms. The snow fell, nor did it cease to fall. He woke all night and got up and coaxed the fire to life again. He'd unfolded the tarp and propped one end of it beneath the tree to try to reflect back the heat from the fire. He looked at the boy's sleeping face in the orange light, the sunken cheeks streaked with black. He fought back the rage. Useless. He didn't think the boy could travel much more. Even if it stopped snowing, the road would be all but impassable. The snow whispered down in the stillness, and the sparks rose and dimmed and died in the eternal blackness. He was half asleep when he heard a crashing in the woods, and then another. He sat up. The fire was down to scattered flames among the embers, and he listened. The long, dry crack of shearing limbs, and then another crash. He reached and shook the boy. Wake up, he said. We have to go. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes with the back of his hands. What is it? He said. What is it, Papa? Come on, we have to move. What is it? It's the trees. They're falling down. The boy sat up and looked about wildly. It's all right, the man said. Come on. We need to hurry. He scooped up the bedding and he folded it and wrapped the tarp around it. He looked up. The snow drifted into his eyes. The fire was little more than coals, and it gave no light, and the wood was nearly gone, and the trees were falling all about them in the blackness. The boy clung to him. They moved away and he tried to find a clear space in the darkness, but finally he put down the tarp and they just sat and pulled the blankets over them, and he held the boy against him. The whoomp of falling trees and low boom of the loads of snow exploding on the ground set the woods to shuddering. He held the boy and told him it would be all right and that it would stop soon, and after a while it did, the dull bedlam dying in the distance, and again solitary and far away. Then nothing. There, he said, I think that's it. He dug a tunnel under one of the fallen trees, scooping away with the snow with his arm, his frozen hands clawed inside his sleeves. They dragged in their bedding and the tarp, and after a while they slept again for all the bitter cold. When day broke, he pushed his way out of their den, and tarp was heavy with snow. He stood and looked about. It had stopped snowing, and the cedar trees lay about in hillocks of snow and broken limbs, and a few standing trunks that stood stripped and burnt looking in the graying landscape. He trudged out through the drifts, leaving the boy to sleep under the tree like some hibernating animal. The snow was almost to his knees. In the field, the dead sedge was drifted nearly out of sight, and the snow stood in razor curves atop the fence wires, and the silence was breathless. He stood leaning on a post, coughing. He'd little idea where the cart was, and he thought that he was getting stupid and that his head wasn't working right. Concentrate, he said. You have to think. When he turned to go back, the boy was calling him. We have to go, he said. We can't stay here. The boy stared bleakly at the gray drifts. Come on. They made their way out to the fence. Where are we going? The boy said. We have to find the cart. He just stood there, his hands in the armpits of his parka. Come on, the man said. You have to come on. He waded out across the drifted fields. The snow lay deep and gray. Already there was a fresh fall of ash on it. He struggled on a few more feet and then turned and looked back. The boy had fallen. He dropped the armload of blankets and the tarp, and he went back and he picked him up. He was already shivering. He picked him up and he held him. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry. They were a long time finding the cart. He pulled it upright out of the drifts and dug out the knapsack and shook it out and opened it and stuffed in one of the blankets. He put the pack and the other blankets and the coats in the basket and picked up the boy and set him on top and unlaced his shoes and pulled them off. Then he got out his knife and set about cutting up one of the coats and wrapping the boy's feet. He used the entire coat, and then he cut big squares of plastic out of the tarp and gathered them up from underneath and wrapped and tied them at the boy's ankles with the lining from the coat sleeves. He stood back. The boy looked down. Now you, Papa, he said. He wrapped one of the coats around the boy, and then he sat on the tarp in the snow and wrapped his own feet. He stood and warmed his hands inside his parka and then packed their shoes in the knapsack along with the binoculars in the boy's truck. He stood out on the tarp and folded it and tied it with the other blankets on top of the pack and shouldered it up and then took a last long look at the basket, but that was it. Let's go, he said. The boy took one last look back at the cart and then followed him out to the road. It was harder going even than he would have guessed. In an hour they'd made perhaps a mile. He stopped and looked back at the boy. The boy stopped and waited. You think we're going to die, don't you? I don't know. We're not going to die. Okay. But you don't believe me. I don't know. Why do you think we're going to die? I don't know. Stop saying I don't know. Okay. Why do you think we're going to die? We don't have anything to eat. We'll find something. Okay. How long do you think people can go without food? I don't know. But how long do you think? Maybe a few days? And then what? You fall over dead? Yes. Well, you don't. It takes a long time. We have water. That's the most important thing. You don't last very long without water. Okay. But you don't believe me. I don't know. He studied him, standing there with his hands in the pockets of his outsized pinstriped suit coat. Do you think I lie to you? No. But you think I might lie to you about dying? Yes. Okay, I might. But we're not dying. Okay.